almost speak.
She can't speak. Can you hear those sounds? That's not speaking. That's dying.
Flight attendant says she's faking. Little black girl saves choking woman. Ma'am, you need to return to your seat. This disruption is unacceptable. She can't speak. Can you hear those sounds? That's not speaking. That's dying. Sweetie, adults are handling this. Go sit down. But she's turning blue. Look at her face. She's faking for attention. I've seen this before. Some people will do anything for a free upgrade. She's not faking. Please, somebody help. Security will be called if you don't sit down right now. What you just heard was a 9-year-old black girl fighting to save a stranger's life while a flight attendant refused to believe the emergency was real. A trained professional who saw a panicked child and a choking woman and decided it was all an act for attention. Cassandra Morrison had no idea that 7 passengers were recording everything on their phones. You heard the confrontation. Now we're going to tell you the full story of how Matilda Shaw became trained in life-saving techniques at age 9, what really happened at 30,000 feet on Flight 1847, and the moment federal investigators reviewed the footage that ended a career and saved a life. If this story proves that heroes come in the smallest packages, hit that subscribe button right now. Matilda Shaw was 9 years old when she became a hero. 9 years old when she saved a stranger's life. And 9 years old when she learned that being right, being trained, and being brave sometimes isn't enough when the world has already decided what to believe about you. But let's start at the beginning, because Matilda's story doesn't begin on that airplane. It begins 18 months earlier, in a hospital waiting room in Detroit, Michigan, where a little girl sat holding her grandmother's hand while doctors told them that both of Matilda's parents were gone. Car accident. Drunk driver. Instantaneous, they said, as if that word made it hurt less. Matilda Shaw moved into her grandmother's house in the Woodbridge neighborhood of Detroit 3 days after the funeral. Eleanor Thompson was 67 years old, a retired nurse who'd spent 40 years in hospital emergency rooms seeing every kind of trauma the human body could endure. She had arthritic knees that ached when it rained, hands that trembled slightly when she was tired, and a heart that shattered into a million pieces watching her granddaughter try to be brave. The house was small but filled with light. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, and a living room where Eleanor kept photographs of 3 generations of her family on every available surface. Matilda's bedroom had been her mother's childhood room. The wallpaper still had tiny yellow flowers. Eleanor had washed the sheets with lavender soap and placed Matilda's stuffed elephant on the pillow. She'd done everything she could to make it feel like home. But nothing could replace what Matilda had lost. For the first 3 months, Matilda barely spoke. She went to school at Lincoln Elementary, came home, did her homework, ate dinner, and went to bed. Eleanor watched her granddaughter disappear into herself and felt helpless. All those years as a nurse, all that training in crisis response, and she didn't know how to heal a broken heart. It was on a Wednesday in June, 6 months after the accident, when everything changed. Eleanor was making dinner, chicken and rice, when she heard a crash from the living room. She rushed in to find Matilda standing over her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chin, who'd come by to drop off mail and had tripped over the door frame. Mrs. Chin was fine, just startled, but Matilda was frozen. Completely frozen. Staring at the old woman on the floor with terror in her eyes. Eleanor helped Mrs. Chin up, made sure she was okay, walked her home. When she came back, Matilda was sitting on the couch crying. "What's wrong, baby girl? I didn't know what to do. She fell and I didn't know what to do. What if she was really hurt? What if something happened and I just stood there?" Eleanor sat down next to her granddaughter and understood. Matilda wasn't just grieving her parents. She was terrified of being helpless again. Of watching something terrible happen and not being able to stop it. So Eleanor made a decision. That night, after dinner, she brought out her old nursing textbooks. Big heavy volumes with diagrams of the human body. Instructions for CPR, guides for treating shock, burns, choking, bleeding. Matilda stared at them with wide eyes. "Baby, nobody's coming to save us. That's what my mama told me when I was young, and it's the truth. The world isn't set up to rescue people who look like us. So we have to know how to save ourselves. And we have to know how to save each other. You want to learn? Matilda nodded. And so began Emergency Wednesdays. Every Wednesday evening, after Matilda finished her homework and Eleanor finished her crossword puzzle, they practiced. Eleanor taught Matilda how to check for breathing, how to recognize the signs of shock, how to apply pressure to stop bleeding, how to treat a burn, how to help someone having a seizure, and most importantly, how to perform the Heimlich maneuver. The Heimlich was personal for Eleanor. Her younger sister, Marie, had died at a family dinner 23 years earlier, choked on a piece of steak. Everyone panicked. Someone called 911. They waited. Marie turned blue. She died before the ambulance arrived. Eleanor had been a nurse for 15 years at that point, but she'd been in the bathroom when it happened. By the time she got to the dining room, Marie was already gone. Eleanor had carried that guilt for 2 decades. The knowledge that if she'd been there, if anyone had known what to do, Marie would still be alive. She wasn't going to let Matilda carry that same helplessness. Eleanor made it like a game. She used a CPR dummy she borrowed from the hospital where she used to work. She drew diagrams on poster board. She made Matilda practice on her, gently at first, then with more pressure as Matilda got stronger and more confident. She taught her the signs of choking, the difference between someone who can cough and someone who can't, the universal sign, hands at the throat, the color changes in the face, the panic in the eyes, the terrible silence when the airway is completely blocked. 5 and 5, baby. 5 back blows, 5 abdominal thrusts. Keep going until the object comes out or help arrives. Don't stop. Even if you're tired. Even if your arms hurt. You don't stop. Matilda absorbed everything. She started carrying a small notebook, the kind with a purple cover and lined pages, and she wrote down everything Eleanor taught her. She drew diagrams. She made lists. She asked questions that surprised Eleanor with their depth and thoughtfulness. Grandma, what if the person is too heavy for me to get my arms around? Then you modify, baby. You can do it with them sitting down or on their side on the floor. I'll show you. What if they pass out? Then you roll them over and keep doing the thrusts. Unconscious doesn't mean stop. It means work faster. What if I hurt them? What if I break their ribs? Broken ribs heal. Dead doesn't. You do what you have to do. Matilda practiced until her arms ached. She practiced on Eleanor, on her stuffed animals, on diagrams. She timed herself. She made Eleanor quiz her on the steps. She became obsessed with being ready, with never being helpless again. At school, teachers started noticing. Matilda helped a classmate with a nosebleed in the bathroom, knew exactly what to do, kept the girl calm while tilting her head forward and applying pressure. She helped another student who got stung by a bee, recognized the early signs of an allergic reaction, got the teacher to call the nurse immediately. The school nurse started calling her Little Nurse Matilda. Some kids thought it was weird. Some kids thought it was cool. Matilda didn't care what they thought. She just wanted to be ready. For her 9th birthday, Eleanor gave Matilda a silver bracelet. It was delicate, thin enough for a child's wrist, with an engraving on the inside. Be ready, be brave. Matilda wore it every single day. She twisted it when she was nervous. She touched it when she needed courage. It became part of her. By March of 2024, 15 months after moving in with Eleanor, Matilda was a different child than the silent, frozen girl who'd arrived. She still missed her parents every single day. She still cried sometimes at night when she thought Eleanor couldn't hear. But she had purpose now. She had knowledge. She had the power to help. Eleanor's knees had gotten worse over the winter. Arthritis and age and too many years standing in hospital corridors. She walked with a slight limp on cold days. She couldn't move as fast as she used to. But she was proud of Matilda. So incredibly proud. This child had taken grief and turned it into strength. Had taken fear and turned it into preparedness. Had decided that the world might be cruel and unpredictable, but she would be ready for it. In early March, Eleanor surprised Matilda with news. They were going on a trip. Their first vacation together since the accident. Atlanta, Georgia, to visit Eleanor's cousin who Matilda had only met twice. For days. A break from Detroit winter. A break from routine. A chance to be grandmother and granddaughter instead of teacher and student for a little while. Matilda was excited. She packed her suitcase carefully, folding clothes the way Eleanor had taught her, tucking her notebook into her backpack along with her copy of And of Green Gables and a bag of colored pencils. She packed a small medical kit too, just a few band-aids and antiseptic wipes in a zippered pouch, because being ready meant being ready everywhere. March 15, 2024. They arrived at Detroit Metropolitan Airport 3 hours before their flight, because Eleanor didn't believe in cutting things close. Delta Flight 1847 to Atlanta. Departure time, 3:45 p.m. They checked their bags, went through security, found their gate. Gate A7. Matilda pressed her face to the window and watched planes take off and land. She'd only flown twice before, both times with her parents when she was little. The memories were fuzzy now, soft around the edges like old photographs. You nervous, baby? A little. But excited too. That's good. Little bit of nervous keeps you sharp. They boarded at 3:15. Seats 18E and 18F, right side of the plane, economy class. Eleanor took the aisle seat because her knees needed the extra space to stretch. Matilda got the window seat because Eleanor knew she'd want to watch the world get smaller as they climbed into the sky. They settled in, buckled up. The plane was about 73% full, 142 passengers, a normal Thursday afternoon flight. Business travelers typing on laptops. Families with small children. College students with headphones. Elderly couples holding hands. Everyone with somewhere to go, someone to see. 3 rows ahead of them, in seat 15C, sat Patricia Hendricks. 71 years old, white hair styled in soft curls, wearing a floral blouse in shades of pink and cream. She was traveling alone, heading to Atlanta to meet her daughter and 3 grandchildren. She had a book in her lap, a romance novel with a sunset on the cover, and a bag of almonds in her purse because she didn't like airplane snacks. Matilda noticed her briefly when they were boarding. Just a glance, the way you notice people when you're walking down a narrow aisle. Kind face, Matilda thought. Grandma looking. Then Matilda found her seat and forgot about the woman in 15C. The plane pushed back from the gate at 3:43. The flight attendants did their safety demonstration. Exits here, oxygen masks above, life vests under seats, brace position like this. Matilda watched even though most passengers didn't. Eleanor had taught her to always pay attention to safety briefings. You never know when you might need to know where the exits are. The engines roared. The plane rolled down the runway, picking up speed, and then that moment of weightlessness as the wheels left the ground and Detroit fell away beneath them. Matilda watched the city shrink, the buildings becoming tiny, the roads becoming lines, everything becoming a map. Eleanor reached over and squeezed her hand. They were both thinking about Matilda's parents. About the last time this little family had flown together. About absence and presence and how you carry the people you've lost with you everywhere you go. The plane climbed to cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Flight attendants stood up and began preparing the beverage cart. It was 47 minutes into the flight. 3,700 feet above the ground. The cabin was quiet except for the steady hum of engines and the soft murmur of conversations. Peaceful. Ordinary. The kind of unremarkable moment that fills most of life. Matilda pulled out her book, And of Green Gables, and opened to the dog-eared page where she'd left off. Eleanor pulled out her crossword puzzle, reading glasses perched on her nose, pencil tapping against the armrest as she thought. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency. Everything was exactly as it should be. Matilda glanced out the window at the clouds below, solid and white like you could walk on them. She thought about Atlanta, about meeting Eleanor's cousin, about swimming in the hotel pool. She thought about how maybe, just maybe, life was starting to feel normal again. Not the same as before. Never the same. But something like okay. And then, 3 rows ahead, Patricia Hendricks reached into her purse and pulled out her bag of almonds. If you want to see what happens when a 9-year-old's training is put to the ultimate test, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. What would you do if you saw someone choking and the person in charge refused to help? Patricia Hendricks was tired. She'd woken up at 4 in the morning to catch this flight, and the coffee she'd had at the airport had worn off an hour ago. She was looking forward to seeing her daughter, to hugging her grandchildren, to sitting in a comfortable chair that didn't vibrate with engine noise. But for now, she was hungry. The flight attendants were still 2 rows away with the snack cart, and Patricia had never been good at waiting. She opened the bag of almonds. Whole almonds, roasted and lightly salted, the kind she bought in bulk from Costco. She poured a small handful into her palm. Maybe 5 or 6 almonds. She popped them into her mouth all at once. That was her first mistake. Eleanor had taught Matilda that you should never put multiple hard objects in your mouth at the same time, especially if you're tired or distracted, because your swallowing reflex isn't as sharp when you're exhausted. But Patricia didn't know that. She was just hungry. She chewed once, twice, and then she tried to swallow. One of the almonds went down wrong. Not all the way down, but not all the way up either. It lodged itself in her throat, at the narrowest part of her airway, and suddenly Patricia couldn't breathe. She tried to cough. Nothing came out. Just a horrible, strangled wheeze that barely made any sound. She tried to inhale. Nothing. The almond was blocking everything. Complete airway obstruction. The deadliest kind of choking because there's no air moving, which means no sound, which means people often don't realize what's happening until it's almost too late. Patricia's hands flew to her throat. The universal choking sign, the one gesture that transcends language and culture. Hands at throat means I cannot breathe. She stood up, knocking her book to the floor. Her eyes were wide with panic. The person next to her, a businessman in headphones, didn't notice at first. He was watching something on his tablet. Matilda saw it immediately. She'd been reading her book, lost in and Shirley's world of Green Gables and imagination, when something in her peripheral vision triggered every instinct Eleanor had drilled into her. Movement. Wrong movement. Panicked movement. Matilda's head snapped up and she saw Patricia standing in the aisle 3 rows ahead, hands at her throat, face beginning to change color. Grandma. That lady. Eleanor looked up from her crossword puzzle. 40 years as an emergency room nurse meant she recognized what she was seeing in less than 2 seconds. Complete airway obstruction. Choking. Silent. Critical. Oh Lord. She's choking. Eleanor started to stand up, pushing herself out of the seat, but her arthritic knee caught. She'd been sitting for almost an hour and the joint had stiffened. Pain shot through her leg and she winced, grabbing the armrest to steady herself. Matilda was already moving. She unbuckled her seatbelt, her hands steady even though her heart was pounding. She'd practiced this. She'd trained for this. She knew what to do. I can do it, Grandma. Like you taught me. Baby, maybe we should wait for... There's no time. You said seconds matter. Matilda was in the aisle before Eleanor could finish her sentence. She was small for 9 years old, barely 4.5 feet tall, thin in the way kids are before puberty fills them out. She looked even smaller moving through an airplane cabin full of adults. But she moved with purpose, with confidence, heading straight for Patricia. By now, other passengers had noticed. The businessman had pulled off his headphones. The woman across the aisle was standing, uncertain. Patricia was bent over, one hand braced on a seat back, the other at her throat. Her face had gone from its normal pale pink to a deep red. Panic was in her eyes. That specific animal terror of not being able to breathe. Of feeling yourself suffocate. Ma'am? Are you okay? Can you breathe? Should we call someone? No one was doing anything. They were all watching, asking questions, but no one was helping. This is what happens in emergencies. People freeze. They defer. They wait for someone with authority to tell them what to do. And every second they waited, Patricia was dying. Matilda was 5 feet away from Patricia when Cassandra Morrison appeared. Cassandra Morrison was 34 years old and had been a flight attendant with Delta Airlines for 8 years. She was good at her job in the way that people who like control and order are good at jobs with rules and procedures. She ran a tight cabin. She didn't tolerate disruptions. She prided herself on handling situations before they escalated. She had blonde hair pulled back in a bun so tight it gave her headaches by the end of long flights, a uniform that was always impeccable, and a smile that was professional but never quite reached her eyes. She'd been in the galley preparing the beverage service when she heard the commotion in the cabin. Passengers standing, voices raised. Disruption. She came down the aisle to handle it, and the first thing she saw was a small black girl moving toward a standing passenger. "Excuse me, young lady, you need to return to your seat immediately." Matilda didn't look at her. Didn't slow down. Her focus was entirely on Patricia, on the woman who was now making awful gagging sounds, who was turning redder by the second. "She's choking. I know how to help." Cassandra stepped between Matilda and Patricia. Put herself physically in the way. She was 5'7" and Matilda was 4.5 feet tall. The size difference was absurd. Cassandra looked down at this child and saw exactly what she expected to see. A kid causing problems, a kid who needed to be controlled and redirected. "Ma'am, are you choking?" It was a stupid question and Cassandra should have known better. If someone can answer you, they're not choking. If someone can talk, air is moving, which means the airway isn't completely blocked. But Cassandra was following protocol. Assess the situation. Ask questions. Verify before acting. Patricia couldn't respond. She just nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face now, her whole body shaking. "Can you cough? Try to cough for me." Patricia tried. She tried so hard. But nothing came out except a horrible wheezing sound, like air trying to squeeze through the smallest possible opening. Her face was transitioning from red to a darker, more purple shade. Cyanosis. Lack of oxygen. Her body was starting to shut down. "She can't. That means it's a complete blockage. We have to do the Heimlich." Matilda tried to push past Cassandra's legs, to get to Patricia, but Cassandra put a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetie, I'm trained in first aid. I've got this. Please return to your seat." But every second, "No. This is a safety issue." Eleanor had reached them now, limping slightly, out of breath. She'd watched this interaction from 3 rows back and felt ice in her veins. She knew what she was seeing. She'd seen it 100 times in the hospital. Authority dismissing expertise. Adults dismissing children. White people dismissing black people. The assumption that certain people couldn't possibly know what they were talking about. "My granddaughter knows what she's doing. She's been trained." Cassandra turned to Eleanor with that same professional smile, the one that was really a dismissal wearing politeness like a mask. "I'm sure she's very smart, but this is a medical emergency and I'm certified." Patricia was leaning heavily on the seat back now. The color was draining from her face, red fading to pale, lips starting to tint blue. She had maybe 90 seconds of consciousness left. Maybe less. Her brain was screaming for oxygen. Her vision was starting to tunnel. Her legs were weakening. Another flight attendant arrived. David Chin, 28 years old, newer to the job, the kind of person who deferred to senior colleagues because he hadn't learned yet that seniority doesn't always mean correctness. He saw Cassandra handling a situation and immediately fell in line. "What's happening?" "Possible choking." "I'm handling it." Cassandra turned back to Patricia, her voice taking on that careful, slow tone people use when they think someone is overreacting. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to try to cough harder. Really force it." Patricia tried. God, she tried. She coughed with everything she had left. Nothing happened. The almond didn't move. It sat in her throat like a cork in a bottle, completely blocking her airway. She was dying. Right there in the aisle of Flight 1847, surrounded by 142 people, she was dying. "Can you drink some water? Sometimes that helps." Matilda's voice was loud enough that passengers 5 rows away turned to look. She was frustrated, scared, angry. She'd been trained for this exact situation and an adult was preventing her from helping. "Water can make it worse. You're supposed to do abdominal thrusts." Cassandra turned to Matilda, and for the first time, irritation cracked through her professional demeanor. "Excuse me? I don't know what YouTube videos you've been watching, but..." Matilda's hands were shaking as she pulled out her notebook from her backpack. The purple-covered notebook with its careful diagrams and Eleanor's handwriting and hours of emergency Wednesdays condensed into pages of life-saving information. She opened it to the Heimlich page, thrust it toward Cassandra. "My grandma was a nurse for 40 years. She taught me..." Cassandra barely glanced at the notebook. Saw a child's handwriting, crude drawings, the earnest offering of a little girl who thought she knew better than trained adults. That's adorable, but I need you to step back. David, please escort them to their seats. That woman has less than a minute of consciousness left. My granddaughter can save her. Eleanor's voice was firm, the voice she'd used in emergency rooms when doctors were making mistakes and nurses had to speak up to save lives. But Cassandra had been questioned before. Had been challenged by passengers who thought they knew better. Had learned to stand her ground because flight attendants who let passengers override their authority lost control of their cabins. Ma'am, interfering with crew during an emergency is a federal offense. Passengers were pulling out their phones now. In 2024, everyone's first instinct in any situation was to record, to document, to have evidence. 7 people had their phones out and pointed at the scene unfolding in the aisle. They were capturing everything. Cassandra's dismissive tone. Matilda's desperate pleading. Patricia's increasingly dire condition. The kid might be right, she looks really bad. A passenger from across the aisle, middle-aged man in a business suit, trying to help. Everyone please remain calm and seated. Cassandra's voice had an edge now. This situation was spiraling. The child was refusing to listen. The grandmother was being difficult. The passenger was getting worse. And Cassandra was starting to realize, somewhere deep in the back of her mind where instinct lives, that maybe she'd made a mistake. But admitting that meant backing down in front of a cabin full of passengers and a 9-year-old child, and Cassandra Morrison did not back down. Patricia's eyes were rolling back. Her grip on the seat was loosening. She was sagging, her body shutting down, consciousness fading. The human brain can survive about 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen before permanent damage occurs. Patricia was approaching minute 3. Her body was doing everything it could to preserve her vital organs, but it was a losing battle. She's going to die. Please. Matilda was crying now. Frustrated tears of helplessness and rage. She knew what to do. She had trained for this. She was ready. And an adult was stopping her because the adult couldn't imagine that a 9-year-old black girl might know something she didn't. Cassandra pulled out her phone. Pressed the intercom button that connected to the cockpit. This is Morrison in economy. I need the captain informed we may need to make an emergency landing. I have a passenger causing a disturbance and another passenger possibly experiencing a medical episode. Possibly. Look at her. But Cassandra wasn't looking at Patricia. She was looking at her phone, at the protocol checklist, at the procedures she'd been trained to follow. Assess, report, request guidance. She was following the rules. The rules that didn't account for a woman dying in front of her. Patricia collapsed to her knees in the aisle. Her hand fell from her throat. She was barely conscious, her movements sluggish and uncoordinated. The awful wheezing had stopped, not because the blockage was cleared but because she no longer had the strength to try to breathe around it. You're going to have her death on your conscience. Eleanor's voice was breaking. She was watching a woman die. She'd watched people die in the hospital, had held their hands, had done everything medicine could do, and sometimes it wasn't enough. But this was different. This death was preventable. This death was happening because someone in authority refused to listen. I'm following protocol. We're trained to assess before acting. David Chin was looking uncertain now. He was young, still believed in following the chain of command, but his instincts were screaming at him that something was very wrong. Patricia looked bad. Really bad. The kind of bad that ended in lawsuits and incident reports and careers ending. Cassandra, she really doesn't look good, maybe we should? I said I'm handling it. Cassandra knelt down next to Patricia, her voice taking on that careful, condescending tone again. Ma'am, can you hear me? Are you choking or are you having a panic attack? A panic attack. Cassandra was grasping for any explanation other than the obvious one. Because if this woman was really choking, if this was really a life-threatening emergency, then Cassandra had wasted critical minutes and that was unacceptable. Patricia couldn't respond. Couldn't move. Her eyes were half closed, her skin was gray. She was seconds from unconsciousness. Matilda didn't ask permission this time. She dropped to her knees in the aisle beside Patricia. Small hands reaching for the dying woman, 9 years old and terrified but remembering everything Eleanor had taught her. Be ready. Be brave. You cannot. Cassandra grabbed Matilda's shoulder, fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. Trying to pull her back. Trying to maintain control. Young lady, step away right now or I will have security waiting when we land. Eleanor pulled out her phone, hands shaking with fury and fear. I'm recording this. You're preventing a child from administering life-saving aid. The cabin was chaos now. Passengers standing, shouting, some supporting Matilda, some confused, everyone recording. The scene was being captured from 7 different angles. Every word, every action, every second of delay. Let the kid try. What's it going to hurt? That woman is dying. Cassandra stood up, turned to face the crowd of passengers, her voice rising to be heard over the noise. Everyone needs to calm down. She is not dying, she's having an anxiety episode and you're all making it worse. And that's when Patricia Hendricks went completely limp. Her eyes closed. Her body slumped fully to the floor of the aisle. Unconscious. Unresponsive. Her chest wasn't moving. She wasn't breathing. She was dying and everyone in that cabin knew it. The cabin erupted. Gas. Shots. Someone screamed. The illusion that everything was under control shattered completely. I'm doing it. Matilda's voice cut through the chaos. She wasn't asking permission anymore. Wasn't waiting for approval. She was doing what Eleanor had trained her to do. But Patricia was heavy. Dead weight, unconscious, a full-grown woman, and Matilda was 9 years old and weighed maybe 70 pounds. She couldn't lift Patricia from behind in the standard Heimlich position. Her arms weren't long enough, her strength wasn't enough. Matilda's mind raced. She could hear Eleanor's voice in her head. What if the person is too heavy for me to get my arms around? Then you modify, baby. You can do it with them sitting down, or on their side on the floor. Matilda grabbed Patricia's shoulder and rolled her partially onto her side. Positioned herself beside Patricia's body. Placed her small fist just above Patricia's navel, right below the ribcage, exactly where Eleanor had taught her. Placed her other hand on top of the fist. Pulled inward and upward with all the strength in her small body. What? Stop. You don't know what you're doing. You could hurt her. Cassandra was trying to pull Matilda back, grabbing at her arm, but Eleanor blocked her. 67 years old with bad knees and trembling hands, but she stepped between the flight attendant and her granddaughter with a look in her eyes that said, "Try me. Touch my granddaughter again and you'll regret it." 3. David's chin stepped forward, finally finding his courage. Cassandra, let her try. We're losing her. This is my cabin. Cassandra's voice was desperate now, shrill. She'd lost control of the situation completely and she knew it. But she couldn't back down. Couldn't admit she'd been wrong. Couldn't let a child be right when she'd been wrong. 6. Matilda's arms were shaking. She was crying, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't stop. Eleanor had taught her. You don't stop. Even if you're tired. Even if your arms hurt. You don't stop. 7, 8, 9. Nothing was happening. Patricia wasn't responding. Her lips were blue. Her skin was gray. Matilda had been trained for this, but training isn't the same as reality. Training doesn't prepare you for how heavy a dying person feels, how your arms burn, how your heart pounds so hard you think it might break through your ribs. The almond dislodged. It flew out of Patricia's mouth, ejected by the force of Matilda's thrust, and skittered across the aisle floor. A small, ordinary almond. The kind you buy in bags at the grocery store. The kind that kills 3,000 people a year in the United States. The kind that had almost killed Patricia Hendricks. Patricia gasped. It was the most beautiful sound Matilda had ever heard. A horrible, rattling, desperate inhale. Air rushing into lungs that had been starved for oxygen. Patricia coughed, a real cough this time, deep and painful. She breathed. Coughed again. Breathed. Her eyes fluttered open. Confused. Disoriented. Alive. The cabin erupted again, but this time it was relief. Applause. Crying. Strangers hugging strangers. The kind of collective emotional release that happens when everyone just witnessed a near-death and a miracle in the same breath. Matilda was still on her knees beside Patricia, her whole body shaking now. Adrenaline crash. The realization of what had just happened. What could have happened? What she'd just done. Patricia was breathing, crying, her hand reaching out to touch Matilda's face with trembling fingers. The cockpit door opened. Captain James Rivera came down the aisle. 52 years old, 28 years of flying experience, a man who'd seen emergencies and knew how to read a crisis. He took in the scene in seconds. Woman on the floor, breathing but distressed. Small child on her knees beside the woman, crying. Flight attendant standing with guilt and panic written all over her face. Crowd of passengers with phones out. Amand on the floor. What's happening here? Cassandra immediately went into damage control mode. Her voice was professional again, controlled, the panic smoothed over with years of training in customer service and conflict management. Captain, I had a passenger emergency and this child interfered with my protocols. She could have caused serious injury. The passenger is fine now, but... Captain Rivera knelt beside Patricia, his voice gentle. Ma'am, can you speak? Patricia was still catching her breath, each inhale painful but precious. She looked at Matilda, at this small child who'd saved her life, and started crying harder. The little girl. She saved my life. The almond. I was choking. She saved my life. Rivera looked at Matilda. Really looked at her. Saw her silver bracelet, her tear-stained face, her purple notebook lying open on the floor showing a careful diagram of the Heimlich maneuver. You did this? Matilda nodded, unable to speak. She twisted her bracelet. Be ready, be brave. The Heimlich maneuver. She was choking on an almond. Rivera looked at the almond on the floor. Looked at Patricia's face, still regaining its normal color. Continue. January 22nd. D at Matilda's hands, still positioned exactly right, exactly where they should be for abdominal thrusts. He'd been trained in emergency response. He knew what he was looking at. You're telling me this child performed the Heimlich while you stood by? Cassandra's face went pale. I was assessing the situation. She could have been having a panic attack or... A passenger held up his phone, a black man in his 40s, wearing a business suit, voice shaking with anger. We got it all recorded. You said she was faking. Multiple passengers echoed him, a chorus of voices, evidence mounting from every angle. I recorded it too. I got it. It's all on video. She said the woman was faking for a free upgrade. She wouldn't let the kid help. She grabbed the kid's shoulder. Rivera's jaw tightened. He stood up, his voice dropping to a tone that everyone in the military or emergency services recognizes. Command voice. No room for argument. Cassandra, galley. If you think Matilda deserves recognition for her bravery, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Have you ever witnessed someone in authority refuse to listen to the truth? Cassandra Morrison followed Captain Rivera to the galley at the front of the plane. Passengers watched her walk that long aisle, her professional composure cracking with each step. David Chin stayed with Patricia and Matilda, radiating the kind of guilty discomfort that comes from knowing you should have spoken up sooner. In the galley, Rivera and Cassandra spoke in voices too low for the cabin to hear, but body language tells its own story. Cassandra's hands moving in defensive gestures, explanations, justifications. Rivera's arms crossed, head shaking, face getting harder with each word she spoke. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. By the end, Cassandra's face had gone from pale to gray. She looked like she might be sick. In the cabin, things were happening quickly. A woman from first class made her way back to economy. Sarah Chin, 42 years old, an EMT from Chicago traveling to Atlanta for a conference. She'd heard the commotion, had been blocked from helping by the crowd in the narrow aisle, but now she pushed through with professional purpose. I'm a paramedic. Can I check her vitals? Eleanor nodded, relieved. Finally, someone with authority who actually wanted to help. Sarah knelt beside Patricia, pulled a small penlight from her purse, checked pupil response. Took her pulse. Listened to her breathing. Asked her questions. What's your name? Do you know where you are? Can you take a deep breath for me? Patricia answered everything. Her voice was hoarse, throat bruised from the choking and from Matilda's thrusts, but she was coherent. Alert. Alive. Sarah turned to Matilda, who was sitting on the floor now, Eleanor's arm around her shoulders. You saved her life. That was a perfect Heimlich. How old are you? 9. Sarah blinked. Looked at Eleanor. Looked back at Matilda. 9. My God. Who taught you? My grandma. She was a nurse. Sarah looked at Eleanor with something like awe. You taught a 9-year-old the Heimlich maneuver. I taught her a lot of things. Figured the world's dangerous enough, she should know how to help. Well, your teaching saved this woman's life. Another minute and we'd be looking at brain damage or death. The Heimlich was perfect. Positioning, pressure, persistence. I couldn't have done it better myself. Eleanor pulled Matilda closer, both of them crying now. Relief and pride and the crash that comes after surviving something terrible. Captain Rivera returned from the galley. Cassandra wasn't with him. He carried a tablet, moved through the cabin with calm authority. He approached the passengers who'd been recording. I need to ask if anyone who recorded this incident would be willing to provide copies for our incident report. 7 hands went up immediately. People wanted to help. Wanted this documented. Wanted Matilda's heroism and Cassandra's failure recorded officially, permanently, undeniably. Rivera took their names, their seat numbers, their email addresses. Then he asked to see one of the videos. A passenger handed him a phone. Rivera watched, his face expressionless, but his jaw got tighter and tighter as the video played. On the screen, Cassandra's voice came through crystal clear. She's faking for attention. I've seen this before. Some people will do anything for a free upgrade. Matilda's small voice, desperate. She's not faking. Please, somebody help. Cassandra again. She is not dying, she's having an anxiety episode and you're all making it worse. The video showed Patricia collapsing. Showed Matilda performing the Heimlich with shaking arms and tears streaming down her face. Showed the almond ejecting. Showed Patricia gasping, breathing, living. Rivera handed the phone back. His voice was carefully neutral. Thank you. This will be very helpful for our investigation. He turned to Matilda, Eleanor, and Patricia. I'd like to ask you to move to first class for the remainder of the flight. More comfortable seats, more privacy. We have about 90 minutes left before we land in Atlanta, and I think you've all earned some peace and quiet. It wasn't really a question. It was an apology wrapped in an upgrade. Rivera had been flying long enough to know when his crew had failed catastrophically, and he was already doing damage control. Flight attendants appeared, not Cassandra, others from the crew, their faces apologetic and kind. They helped Patricia to her feet, steadied her when she wobbled. They gathered Eleanor's crossword puzzle and Matilda's book and backpack. They escorted all 3 of them to first class like honored guests, which in a way they were. First class was a different world. Wide leather seats. Extra legroom. Warm towels and real glasses instead of plastic cups. The flight attendants brought water, juice, warm cookies. They asked if anyone needed anything. They apologized over and over, even though most of them hadn't been anywhere near the incident. I'm so sorry for what you experienced. Is there anything we can get for you? Please let us know if you need anything at all. Matilda sat in a seat that was bigger than her bed at home, Eleanor beside her, Patricia across the aisle. The 3 of them, connected now by crisis and survival, sat in silence for a moment. Just breathing. Just being alive. Captain Rivera appeared again, tablet in hand. He sat down across from them, his expression serious but kind. Matilda, I need to hear exactly what happened from your perspective. Can you walk me through it? Matilda's voice was quiet, tired, but she told him everything. She'd seen Patricia choking. She'd recognized the signs. She'd tried to help. The flight attendant had stopped her. She'd tried to show her training. The flight attendant had dismissed her. Patricia had collapsed. Matilda had done the Heimlich anyway. Rivera listened without interrupting. When Matilda finished, he asked to see her notebook. She handed it over, watched him flip through the pages. Eleanor's handwriting mixed with Matilda's. Diagrams of the human airway. Lists of choking signs. Step-by-step Heimlich instructions. Practice logs, dates and times when Matilda had trained. You taught her this? Rivera directed the question to Eleanor. My sister died choking 23 years ago. Nobody at the table knew what to do. I watched her die because of ignorance. I wasn't going to let my granddaughter be that helpless. You gave this plane the only person who was ready for that emergency. Rivera's voice was heavy with implications. A plane full of adults, including trained flight crew, and the only person prepared to save a life was a 9-year-old child. He turned to Patricia. Ma'am, how are you feeling? Patricia's voice was still hoarse but stronger. Sore. Grateful. I have 3 grandchildren about her age. Thank you for not giving up on me. She reached across the aisle and took Matilda's hand. They sat like that for a moment, young and old, stranger and savior, just holding on. Rivera's tablet buzzed. He glanced at it, read something, nodded to himself. The passengers' videos show the flight attendant prevented you from helping for almost 2 full minutes while Mrs. Hendricks was losing consciousness. They show her accusing Mrs. Hendricks of faking. They show her physically restraining you. Is she in trouble? Matilda's voice was small. Despite everything, despite being grabbed and dismissed and told to sit down while someone died, she didn't want to get anyone in trouble. 9 years old and already conditioned to worry about the consequences for adults who'd wronged her. That's not for you to worry about. What you need to know is that you did everything right. You stayed calm. You remembered your training. You saved a life. Rivera stood up, preparing to return to the cockpit. He paused. When we land, there will be paramedics boarding to check on Mrs. Hendricks. Standard protocol. There will also be Federal Air Marshals and Delta supervisors. You'll need to give statements. I want you to know that what happened to you on this flight is unacceptable, and it will be addressed. He left. The cabin was quiet except for the engine hum and the soft sounds of other first-class passengers watching movies or reading or sleeping, unaware of the drama that had unfolded rows behind them. Eleanor looked at her granddaughter. Matilda looked so small in that big leather seat, her feet not quite reaching the floor, her silver bracelet catching the light. How are you doing, baby girl? Matilda thought about it. Really thought. I'm okay. But Grandma, why didn't she believe me? Eleanor had been dreading this question. Had known it was coming since the moment Cassandra Morrison looked at her granddaughter and saw someone to dismiss rather than someone to listen to. Sometimes grown-ups think kids don't know things. And sometimes, Eleanor hesitated, choosing words carefully. Sometimes people make assumptions about who gets to be smart or capable. Because I'm black? 9 years old and she already knew. Of course she knew. You can't grow up black in America and not learn early that the world will question you in ways it doesn't question others. I don't know what was in her heart, baby. But I know that you were right and you were brave, and that's what matters. Matilda pulled out her purple notebook, found a blank page. Wrote carefully, Flight 1847, Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, Amen. She's okay. She added the date. Added the time. Closed the notebook and held it against her chest like a shield. Grandma, do you think she would have listened if I was older? Or what? Eleanor had no answer. Or rather, she had an answer, but it was one that would break both their hearts to say aloud. So she just held her granddaughter and let the silence speak. The plane began its descent into Atlanta. The flight attendants prepared the cabin for landing. Patricia fell asleep across the aisle, exhausted from nearly dying and from being saved. Matilda watched out the window as the ground came closer, as Atlanta spread out below them in patterns of light and shadow. She'd saved a life at 30,000 feet. She'd done everything Eleanor had trained her to do. She'd been ready. She'd been brave. But she'd also learned something that no emergency Wednesday could have taught her. She'd learned that being right wasn't always enough. That knowledge didn't always grant authority. That a 9-year-old black girl could perform a perfect Heimlich maneuver and still be dismissed, grabbed, told to sit down by someone who should have known better. The wheels touched down. The plane taxied to the gate. Matilda twisted her bracelet and wondered if being ready and being brave would ever be enough in a world that had already decided what to expect from her. If Matilda's courage inspires you, smash that subscribe button right now. Do you think Cassandra Morrison's actions were about protocols or something deeper? The plane stopped at gate C-12 in Atlanta. The seatbelt sign dinged off, but Captain Rivera's voice came over the intercom before anyone could stand. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for a few moments. We have emergency personnel boarding for a medical check. Thank you for your patience. The door opened. Paramedics came up the jet bridge first, 3 of them with equipment bags and a stretcher. They went straight to first class where Patricia, Matilda, and Eleanor waited. The lead paramedic was a woman in her 50s, efficient and kind, asking Patricia questions while checking her blood pressure, listening to her lungs, examining her throat with a light. You're going to have some bruising and soreness for a few days, but everything looks good. You're lucky. Very, very lucky. She glanced at Matilda. This is the one who helped you? She saved my life. The paramedic knelt in front of Matilda's seat, eye level with her. Kid, I've been a paramedic for 26 years. I've seen a lot of Heimlich maneuvers. Some good, some bad, some done by professionals who barely remembered their training. You did it by the book. Probably saved her from brain damage. Another minute and we'd be looking at a very different outcome. She stood up, ruffled Matilda's hair gently, and returned to Patricia. We'd like to take you to the hospital for observation. Just a few hours, make sure everything's okay. Standard protocol for choking incidents. Patricia agreed. She wanted to argue, wanted to get to her daughter's house and hug her grandchildren, but she was tired and scared and her throat hurt. She let them help her onto the stretcher, but before they wheeled her away, she grabbed Matilda's hand one more time. I'm going to tell everyone about you. Everyone. You're my guardian angel. After the paramedics left, federal air marshals boarded. 2 of them, a man and a woman, both in plain clothes with badges clipped to their belts. Behind them came a Delta supervisor, a black woman in her 40s named Michelle Torres with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she was very, very unhappy about whatever she'd been briefed on. The marshals took statements from everyone. From Matilda and Eleanor first, then from other passengers who'd witnessed the incident, then from the flight crew. Cassandra Morrison gave her statement separately, in the jetway, away from everyone else. The process took 45 minutes. Gate agents held the next flight. Passengers waiting to board stood in the terminal craning their necks, trying to see what was happening. Finally, Matilda and Eleanor were allowed to leave the plane. Michelle Torres walked with them. On behalf of Delta Airlines, I cannot apologize enough for what you experienced today. What our flight attendant did was unacceptable and will be addressed. Her voice was professional, but Matilda could hear real anger underneath. This supervisor knew that what had happened wasn't just a failure of protocol. It was a failure of humanity. It was a child being dismissed and a woman nearly dying because someone in authority refused to listen. We'll be in touch within 24 hours. In the meantime, your hotel tonight is on us. Your original hotel reservation has been upgraded, and we're providing meal vouchers and transportation. It was corporate apology language, the kind of compensation that comes with legal liability, but it was something. Matilda and Eleanor collected their bags from baggage claim and took a taxi to their hotel. The driver asked them about their flight, just making conversation, and Eleanor said it was fine. Just fine. Matilda stared out the window at Atlanta passing by and said nothing. That night, in a hotel room that was too big and too quiet, Matilda couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Patricia's face turning blue. Kept feeling Cassandra's hand on her shoulder, pulling her back. Kept hearing that awful wheeze of air trying to get through a blocked airway. She got up, found her notebook, and wrote more details. Not because she wanted to remember, but because Eleanor had taught her to document everything. Facts mattered. Evidence mattered. While Matilda was writing in her notebook in Atlanta, something was happening online. Marcus Johnson, the businessman who'd been sitting across the aisle from Patricia, had gotten home to Chicago at 9 p.m. He'd downloaded the video from his phone to his laptop, watched it 3 times, and gotten angrier with each viewing. At 10:47 p.m. Eastern Time, he uploaded it to Twitter. The caption read, 9-year-old black girl saves choking passenger while Delta flight attendant says woman is faking for attention. Watch until the end. This child is a hero and was treated like a criminal. Flight 1847, Detroit to Atlanta, March 15, 2024. Delta needs to answer for this. He tagged Delta's official account. He used hashtags. He pressed post and went to bed, not expecting much. Maybe a few hundred people would see it. Maybe Delta would send him a form letter apology. Maybe nothing would happen at all. By midnight, the video had 50,000 views. By 3 a.m., it had crossed 1 million. By the time the sun rose on March 16th, it had been viewed 2.4 million times. The video was devastating in its clarity. Phone cameras in 2024 had incredible quality, and Marcus had caught everything. The audio was clear. You could hear every word. Cassandra's voice, dismissive and certain. She's faking for attention. I've seen this before. Some people will do anything for a free upgrade. Matilda's voice, desperate and young. She's not faking. Please, somebody help. Patricia's terrible silent choking, her collapse, the panic in her eyes. Cassandra again, to the entire cabin. She is not dying, she's having an anxiety episode and you're all making it worse. And then the moment that broke hearts across the internet. Matilda, 9 years old, crying while performing the Heimlich maneuver on an unconscious woman. Her small arms shaking with effort. Her voice, barely audible, please work, please work, please work. The almond ejecting. Patricia gasping for air. Matilda collapsing beside her, sobbing. The video went viral in the specific way that social justice content goes viral in the 2024 internet ecosystem. It hit every emotional pressure point. Heroism. Injustice. A child dismissed by authority. A life saved. A wrong that demanded righting. By Friday morning, March 17th, it had 18 million views. Other passengers started posting their videos. Different angles, same story. 7 different perspectives of the same incident, and every single one showed Cassandra Morrison preventing a child from saving a life. The hashtags were trending by Friday afternoon. Matilda the hero was #1 on Twitter. Delta flight attendant was #3. Justice for Matilda was #5. The internet did what the internet does. It investigated. Within 36 hours, people had identified Cassandra Morrison. Found her LinkedIn profile listing 8 years with Delta. Found her Facebook account before she could delete it. Found her Instagram. Found her Twitter. Screenshots were taken and shared before she could scrub her digital presence. And those screenshots were damning. A post from 2 years earlier, parents need to teach their kids to stay in their lane. Not everyone needs to be a hero. A comment on a news article about student activism. These kids need to respect authority and stop thinking they know everything. A shared meme with a caption. Remember when kids listen to adults instead of arguing? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Individual posts that might mean nothing but compiled together painted a picture of someone who had strong opinions about children knowing their place and not questioning adults. The comments flooded in before Cassandra could shut down her accounts. Thousands of them. Angry, hurt, outraged. You almost killed someone because you couldn't listen to a child. A 9-year-old had to save a life while you stood there being wrong. How many times have you dismissed people? How many times have you been wrong? This isn't about protocol. This is about ego and prejudice. Delta's social media accounts were inundated. Every post, no matter the topic, was flooded with comments about Flight 1847. People demanded answers. Demanded accountability. Demanded Cassandra Morrison be fired. The news media picked it up on Saturday, March 18th. CNN ran it as a feel-good hero story with a dark undercurrent. NBC focused on the flight attendant's failure. ABC brought on a pediatrician and a civil rights attorney to discuss child competence and racial bias. Fox News tried to make it about parental responsibility and whether 9-year-olds should be learning medical procedures. Medical professionals weighed in on Twitter, on LinkedIn, in news interviews. Dr. Michael Torres, an ER physician from Boston. That child performed a textbook Heimlich. The flight attendant's delay could have resulted in death or permanent brain damage. This is exactly why we advocate for universal first aid training. The American Red Cross issued a statement. We commend Matilda Shaw's bravery, quick thinking, and excellent training. Her actions demonstrate why first aid education is critical for all ages. We would be honored to provide her with advanced training and recognition. By Sunday, the story had spread beyond social media and news. It was in late-night comedy show monologues. It was in Sunday morning political talk shows. It was being discussed in churches and community centers. It was the story everyone was talking about. And Delta knew they had to respond. On Sunday, March 19th at 2 p.m., Delta released an official statement. Delta Airlines is aware of an incident that occurred on Flight 1847 from Detroit to Atlanta on March 15th. We are conducting a thorough investigation into the actions of our crew members. The flight attendant in question has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of this review. We are deeply grateful for Matilda Shaw's heroic actions and profoundly regret that our crew member did not respond appropriately to this emergency. The safety and well-being of our passengers is our highest priority, and we are taking this matter extremely seriously. We will provide updates as our investigation continues. The statement was corporate speak, carefully worded by lawyers, designed to acknowledge without admitting liability. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. The internet wanted Cassandra Morrison fired. Not suspended. Not on leave. Fired. The pressure mounted. Delta's stock price dipped slightly. Not a crash, but enough that shareholders noticed. Hashtags kept trending. The story wouldn't die. On Tuesday, March 21st, 6 days after the incident, Delta released a second statement. After completing our investigation and reviewing all available evidence, including passenger videos and crew reports, Delta Airlines has terminated the employment of the flight attendant involved in the March 15th incident on Flight 1847. This individual's actions violated our core values, our safety protocols, and the trust our passengers place in us. We have reached out personally to Matilda Shaw and her family to express our gratitude and our apologies. We are also implementing additional training for all flight crew on emergency response procedures and implicit bias recognition. Cassandra Morrison was fired. The internet celebrated. Justice, they said. Accountability. Consequences. But for Cassandra Morrison, her life imploded. She became unemployable in the airline industry. Her name was permanently associated with Choking Karen, the nickname the internet had given her. Her face was recognizable. Her story was the first thing that came up when anyone Googled her name. She deleted all her social media accounts. Moved out of her apartment because people had posted her address online. Changed her phone number because people called to harass her. Disappeared from public life as much as anyone can disappear in the digital age. Some people felt satisfied. She'd nearly killed someone through negligence and ego. She dismissed a child. She'd been wrong and refused to admit it until it was almost too late. She deserved consequences. Others felt the punishment exceeded the crime. Fired, but doxxed? Harassed? Having her entire life destroyed? The internet's capacity for mob justice made some people uncomfortable, even those who agreed she'd been wrong. But the conversation wasn't really about Cassandra Morrison anymore. It had grown bigger than one flight attendant's mistake. Think pieces flooded websites and newspapers. The adultification of black girls. How Matilda Shaw's heroism exposes systemic bias. When 9-year-olds know more than adults, a crisis of authority. Who gets to be a hero? Race, age, and believability in America. Civil rights organizations issued statements. The NAACP, how many times do black children have to prove themselves before they're believed? Matilda Shaw is a hero who was treated like a threat. Her story is exceptional, but the doubt she faced is not. The Children's Defense Fund. Children, especially black children, are often dismissed, doubted, and criminalized. They're seen as older than they are, less innocent than they should be. Matilda's story shows us what we lose when we refuse to see children's competence. Academic studies were cited. Statistics shared. Research showing black patients receive worse medical care, less pain management, less belief when they report symptoms. Studies showing black girls as young as 5 are perceived as older, less innocent, more adult than their white peers. This is called adultification. Data showing that white authority figures are more likely to doubt the competence of black individuals even when presented with identical credentials. The conversation expanded. People started sharing their own stories. I'm a black doctor and patients ask if I'm really a doctor. I'm a black engineer and people assume I'm in HR. I'm a black professor and students question my credentials. I'm a black child who was suspended for behavior that got white kids a talking to. The stories piled up. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. A collective documentation of what it means to exist in a body the world has decided can't possibly know what it's talking about. News outlets requested interviews with Matilda and Eleanor. ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, local Detroit news, national morning shows, podcasts, everyone wanted to talk to the 9-year-old hero. Eleanor declined most of them. She could see what the attention was doing to Matilda. The girl who'd been so confident on Emergency Wednesdays was becoming quiet, withdrawn. The praise made her uncomfortable. The questions made her sad. But Eleanor agreed to one interview. Local Detroit news, WXYZ, a reporter named Jennifer Hassan who'd promised to be gentle, who'd promised to let Matilda tell her story in her own words. They filmed it in Eleanor's living room on March 25, 10 days after the incident. Matilda wore a purple dress, her silver bracelet visible on her wrist. Eleanor sat beside her, holding her hand. Jennifer Hassan asked softball questions at first. How are you feeling? How did you learn the Heimlich? Can you walk us through what happened? Matilda answered in a quiet voice, choosing words carefully. She seemed older than 9 in that interview, weighted down by something children shouldn't have to carry. Then Jennifer asked the question that would make this interview go viral too. Matilda, what made you keep trying when the adult told you to stop? Matilda looked at Eleanor. Eleanor squeezed her hand. Permission to tell the truth. My grandma always says if you know you're right and someone's in danger, you can't be quiet. So I wasn't quiet. The interview aired that evening. By midnight it had been viewed 3 million times on YouTube. The clip of Matilda's answer was shared across every social media platform. If you know you're right and someone's in danger, you can't be quiet. It became a rallying cry. A mantra. A call to action for children and adults alike who'd been told to sit down, shut up, know their place. Patricia Hendricks gave her own interview from her home in Atlanta. She'd spent one night in the hospital for observation and had been released with a clean bill of health. Her throat was bruised but healing. Her gratitude was overwhelming. She sat in her living room surrounded by her 3 grandchildren, ages 7, 9, and 11. She looked at the camera and cried. That baby saved my life. She had to fight an adult to do it. She had to ignore someone in authority, risk getting in trouble, risk being wrong, because she knew she was right. And she was right. What does that say about us? What does that say about a world where a 9-year-old child has more courage and competence than the adults who were supposed to be in charge? Patricia's voice broke. I got to come home to my grandchildren because a little girl refused to give up on me. I got to hug them, read to them, be with them. Every moment I have now is because of Matilda. And she had to fight for my life while someone told her she was wrong. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget her. The interview destroyed people. Comments sections filled with crying emojis, with expressions of gratitude, with anger that Matilda had been put in that position. Civil rights attorney Lisa Rodriguez appeared on MSNBC to discuss the broader implications. This incident is a microcosm of systemic issues we see across institutions. Black children are less likely to be believed by teachers, by doctors, by authority figures. Studies show they're disciplined more harshly for the same behaviors. They're seen as older, more responsible, less deserving of protection. Matilda Shaw had to prove herself in a life-or-death situation because someone in authority had already decided a 9-year-old black girl couldn't possibly know better than her. This is the water we swim in. This is the air we breathe. And until we acknowledge it, it will keep happening. Everyone had a take. Everyone had an opinion. Conservative commentators said it was about respecting flight crew authority and following protocol. Liberal commentators said it was about racial bias and the adultification of black children. Centrist commentators tried to find middle ground and satisfied no one. But through all of it, one truth remained consistent across every political perspective. Matilda Shaw knew how to save a life, and a flight attendant decided a black child couldn't possibly know better than her. The evidence was undeniable. 7 videos from 7 angles. Crystal clear audio. A little girl performing a perfect Heimlich maneuver while crying and begging someone to believe her. Subscribe now if you believe every child deserves to be heard and believed. How would you have reacted if you were a passenger on that flight? 3 weeks after Flight 1847, Cassandra Morrison broke her silence. She created a new Instagram account, private at first, then switched to public. The username was generic, forgettable, designed to not attract immediate attention. She posted a video, 1 minute and 47 seconds long. She was sitting in what looked like a therapist's office. Neutral beige walls, a painting of a lighthouse, a tissue box visible in the corner of the frame. She wore minimal makeup, a simple sweater, her blonde hair down instead of pulled back in her signature tight bun. She looked smaller than she had in uniform. Tired. Defeated. She spoke directly to the camera, reading from notes in her lap, her voice carefully controlled. I want to apologize to Matilda Shaw, Eleanor Thompson, and Patricia Hendricks for my actions on Flight 1847. I was following what I believe to be proper protocol, but I now understand I made serious errors in judgment. I never intended to harm anyone. I was concerned for passenger safety and reacted poorly under pressure. I panicked when I should have listened. I let my ego override my training. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment. She paused, took a breath, continued. I am committed to learning from this experience. I have enrolled in implicit bias training and advanced emergency response courses. I am working with a therapist to understand how my actions contributed to a dangerous situation. I hope that someday the people I hurt can forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope for it anyway. She looked down at her notes, back up at the camera. I've lost my job. I've lost my career. I've lost my sense of who I am. But Matilda Shaw almost lost her life trying to save someone while I stood in her way. Patricia Hendricks almost lost her life because I refused to listen. Those are the things that matter. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The video ended. Comments were disabled. Shares were limited. It was damage control, carefully constructed, probably reviewed by a lawyer and a PR consultant. Every word chosen to minimize liability while expressing contrition. The video was viewed 400,000 times in the first 6 hours. News outlets picked it up, analyzed it, dissected it. Media literacy experts pointed out the careful language, the passive voice in places, the way she framed herself as a victim of circumstance rather than the perpetrator of harm. Matilda and Eleanor never responded. Eleanor's position was simple. If Matilda didn't want to engage, they wouldn't engage. And Matilda didn't want to engage. She'd watched the apology video once, at Eleanor's insistence because Eleanor wanted her to see it, and then never mentioned it again. Patricia Hendricks did respond. On her Facebook page, visible to friends but shared and screenshotted thousands of times. An apology given because you lost your job isn't the same as an apology from the heart. I'm alive because a child refused to give up when an adult gave up on me. I'll never forget that. Actions have consequences. I hope Cassandra Morrison learns and grows, but I don't owe her forgiveness. None of us do. The internet largely agreed. The apology felt hollow. Performative. The kind of thing you do because a publicist told you to, not because you've experienced genuine growth. Some people argued that she'd been punished enough. That mob justice had gone too far. That everyone makes mistakes and she'd lost everything. Others argued that almost killing someone through negligence and ego isn't a mistake, it's a choice. That she'd had multiple chances to listen and refused everyone. That consequences aren't the same as persecution. The debate raged for a few days, then died down as the internet moved on to the next outrage, the next injustice, the next viral moment. Cassandra Morrison disappeared from public view. Deleted the Instagram account. Moved to a different state, according to rumors, though no one could confirm. Became a ghost story, a cautionary tale, a name that came up when people talked about bias and authority and the price of being wrong. But while Cassandra Morrison faded into obscurity, Matilda Shaw's life continued under a spotlight she'd never asked for. 6 months later, September 2024, Matilda was back at Lincoln Elementary starting 5th grade. The school had held an assembly in her honor in April. The principal had given a speech about heroism and courage. They'd presented Matilda with a citizenship award, a plaque that hung in the main hallway with her name and a description of what she'd done. Local news had covered it. More interviews, more attention, more people treating her like she was special. Matilda hated it. The American Red Cross had invited her to speak at 2/2. Continue. 1 p.m. A youth first aid training event in Detroit in June. Eleanor had helped her write a speech. Matilda had stood on a stage in front of 200 people and talked about emergency Wednesdays and why everyone should learn basic life-saving skills. She'd been terrified but got through it. The audience had given her a standing ovation. People had cried. It should have felt good. It should have felt like recognition, like validation, like proof that she'd done something important. But Matilda just felt tired. She and Eleanor still practiced emergency Wednesdays. Still went through scenarios, still reviewed procedures. But something had changed. Matilda was more hesitant now. She second-guessed herself. She asked permission more. Am I allowed to try this? Is it okay if I practice on you? Are you sure I should learn this next part? Eleanor noticed. Of course she noticed. Her confident, brave granddaughter had become uncertain. The world had told Matilda she was a hero, but Matilda had learned something the world didn't seem to understand. She'd learned that being right wasn't enough. That knowledge wasn't enough. That even when you save someone's life, prove yourself beyond any doubt, there's still a cost. In late August, they had to fly to Houston to visit Eleanor's sister. Matilda had anxiety attacks the week before the flight. Nightmares about choking, about people not listening, about failing to save someone. Eleanor held her, talked her through it, but they both knew what was happening. Flight 1847 had traumatized Matilda in ways that praise and awards and viral videos couldn't heal. At the airport, Matilda froze at TSA. Just stopped walking, staring at the security checkpoint. What's wrong, baby? What if they don't believe our tickets are real? Eleanor's heart broke. She knelt down, eye level with her granddaughter, right there in the middle of the airport with people streaming around them. Our tickets are real. Our IDs are real. We belong here. You belong anywhere you choose to be. But what if they don't think so? Then they're wrong. Just like that flight attendant was wrong. Baby, you can't live your life trying to prove yourself to people who've already decided not to believe you. You just have to know who you are and what you're capable of. The rest is their problem, not yours. But it didn't feel like their problem. It felt like Matilda's problem. It felt like something she had to carry, had to navigate, had to manage. They made it through security. They made it to Houston and back. But Matilda was different after that trip. More careful. More aware. More burdened. Patricia Hendricks sent letters every month. Beautiful cards with handwritten notes expressing gratitude and checking in on Matilda. Patricia's granddaughter Emma, who was also 9, started video chatting with Matilda once a week. They became friends in the way that kids do, bonding over shared interests in books and art and the complicated experience of being 9 years old in a world that felt very big and very confusing. Patricia invited Matilda and Eleanor to Atlanta for Thanksgiving. They went, spent 4 days with Patricia's family, ate turkey and sweet potato pie and laughed around a table full of people who loved Matilda for who she was, not just for what she'd done. It helped. Having people who saw her as more than the girl who saved a life helped. But it didn't erase the lesson she'd learned at 30,000 feet. The school year continued. Matilda was a good student, smart and conscientious, the kind of kid teachers love. She joined the school's first aid club, taught by the nurse. She helped younger students with scrapes and bumps. She was competent and kind. But something was missing. That confidence, that certainty she'd had on Flight 1847 when she pushed past a flight attendant and saved a life, that was gone. It happened on a Tuesday in October. Lunch period. Matilda was sitting with her friends in the cafeteria when she heard crying from across the room. A first grader, maybe 6 years old, sitting alone at a table holding their wrist at an odd angle. Possibly broken. Matilda stood up automatically. Muscle memory. Training kicking in. She took 2 steps toward the child, then stopped. Froze. Looked around for an adult. A teacher. A cafeteria monitor. Someone with authority. Someone who wouldn't question her. Someone who would give her permission. Her friend Jasmine noticed. Matilda? You okay? Matilda didn't answer. She was staring at the crying child, at the injured wrist, at the obvious need for help. She knew what to do. She'd learned how to assess possible fractures, how to stabilize an injury, how to keep someone calm while waiting for help. She knew all of it. But she couldn't move. A teacher noticed the crying child and hurried over. Took one look at the wrist and called for the nurse. Handled it efficiently, calmly. Everything was fine. But Matilda sat back down shaking. Later that day, in her classroom, Matilda's teacher Mrs. Rodriguez asked her to stay behind when the other students went to art. Matilda, are you okay? You seemed upset at lunch. I'm fine. Mrs. Rodriguez sat down at a student desk, making herself smaller, less intimidating. She was a good teacher, the kind who actually saw her students. I heard about what happened on the plane in March. I know you went through something scary. Matilda nodded, not trusting her voice. You know it's okay to feel complicated about it, right? You did something amazing. But that doesn't mean it wasn't hard. That doesn't mean it didn't change you. Tears started forming in Matilda's eyes. She blinked them back. That kid at lunch was hurt and I wanted to help but I couldn't. I just stood there. Like I forgot everything. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice was gentle. Did you forget? Or were you scared? Matilda thought about it. Really thought. I was scared. Scared that if I tried to help, someone would tell me I was wrong. Scared that I'd do something and get in trouble. Scared that even if I was right, it wouldn't matter. That's not forgetting, honey. That's learning a lesson that no 9-year-old should have to learn. You learn that being right doesn't always protect you. That helping doesn't always get rewarded. That sometimes the world punishes you for knowing things you're supposed to be too young to know. Matilda started crying for real now, and Mrs. Rodriguez let her. Just sat there and let this little girl cry for everything she'd lost, everything she'd learned, everything she now carried. After school, Eleanor picked Matilda up and noticed immediately that something was wrong. They got home, Matilda went straight to her room and Eleanor followed. Talk to me, baby girl. And Matilda told her. About the injured child. About freezing. About being scared to help without permission. About feeling like she'd lost something important, some part of herself that used to be brave. Eleanor sat on the edge of Matilda's bed, this woman who'd lived 68 years and seen so much, who'd tried so hard to prepare her granddaughter for a cruel world, who taught her to be ready and brave and was now watching that backfire in ways she'd never intended. Baby, listen to me. You haven't lost your bravery. You've just learned to be careful. And I hate that you had to learn that. I hate that the world taught you that knowing things and being competent isn't enough. I hate that you saved a woman's life and came away from it scared instead of proud. Eleanor's voice cracked. I taught you to be ready so you'd never feel helpless. But I couldn't teach you how to protect yourself from people who don't want you to be capable. I couldn't prepare you for that because I don't know how. I've lived my whole life navigating those same doubts, those same assumptions, and I still don't know how to make it not hurt. They cried together. Grandmother and granddaughter. Two black women separated by generations but connected by the same lessons, the same wounds, the same exhausting reality of having to prove themselves over and over again. The next day, during lunch, Matilda saw another student struggling. A classmate who'd spilled milk all over their shirt and was panicking because they'd get in trouble. Simple. Not life or death. Just a kid who needed help. Matilda stood up, walked over, helped the kid clean up, offered them her hoodie to cover the stain. Simple. Low stakes. But she'd needed permission first. Had looked at the lunch monitor, made eye contact, gotten a nod before she moved. Had made sure an authority figure knew what she was doing before she did it. The confidence she'd had, the certainty that if she knew something was right she could just do it, that was gone now. Replaced with caution. With checking. With making sure she had permission before acting. Matilda Shaw saved a life at 9 years old. Performed a perfect Heimlich maneuver at 30,000 feet. Became a hero. But she'd also learned that heroism comes with a price. That competence isn't always celebrated when it comes from unexpected places. That being a 9-year-old black girl who knows things means constantly navigating a world that's decided what you're capable of before you even open your mouth. She still wore her silver bracelet. Be ready, be brave. But now those words felt heavier. Complicated. Because she'd been ready. She'd been brave. And she'd still been dismissed, grabbed, told to sit down by someone who should have known better. On a December evening, 3 days before Christmas, Matilda was helping Eleanor make cookies. Christmas music played on the radio. Snow fell outside the window. Everything should have felt peaceful. Eleanor looked at her granddaughter, at this child who'd grown quieter over the past 9 months, who asked permission more, who second-guessed herself constantly. What are you thinking about, baby? Matilda was silent for a moment, rolling cookie dough between her palms. I'm thinking about Mrs. Hendricks. How she's alive. How she got to have Thanksgiving with her grandkids and Christmas is coming and she'll have that too. How none of that would have happened if I'd listened to that flight attendant. Eleanor waited, sensing there was more. And I'm thinking about how I was right. I knew what to do. I did everything you taught me. And it wasn't enough. I had to fight to be allowed to save someone's life. And now everyone says I'm a hero, but I don't feel like a hero. I just feel tired. Eleanor pulled Matilda into a hug, holding her tight. You're a hero and you're tired. Both can be true. You saved a life and you learned that the world isn't fair. Both can be true. You did something incredible and it cost you something precious. Both can be true. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the kitchen while cookies baked and snow fell and the world kept turning. Matilda Shaw, 9 years old when she saved Patricia Hendricks, 10 years old now, carrying knowledge and competence and trauma all mixed together in a package too small for such heavy things. Cassandra Morrison saw a black child trying to help and decided she must be wrong. She didn't see Eleanor's years of teaching, the emergency Wednesdays, the notebook full of careful notes. She didn't see a trained, capable young person. She just saw race and age and made an assumption. The videos proved her wrong. Patricia Hendricks is alive because a 9-year-old refused to be silenced. Federal investigations happened. A career ended. Justice was served, people said. But none of that erased the fact that Matilda Shaw learned at 30,000 feet what too many black children learn too young. Your knowledge will be questioned. Your expertise will be doubted. Your help will be refused. Until they have no choice but to let you prove them wrong. And even then, even after you save a life, the world will ask you to smile through interviews and accept hollow apologies from people who should have believed you from the start. The world will call you a hero and put your picture on plaques and invite you to speak at events. But no one will give you back the thing you lost. That certainty. That confidence. That belief that being right and being capable is enough. Matilda Shaw is a hero. But heroes shouldn't have to fight this hard just to be heard. She sits in her room sometimes, her purple notebook open, reading through her notes. All the things Eleanor taught her. All the ways she learned to help. And she wonders if helping is always going to feel this complicated. If competence will always require permission. If being ready and being brave will ever be enough on their own, or if she'll spend her whole life proving herself to people who've already decided what she can't possibly be. Patricia Hendricks is alive. That's what matters, people say. But Matilda carries the weight of almost not being believed. Almost not being allowed to help. Almost watching someone die while authority figures dismissed her. She's 10 years old and she's already learned that in this world, being right doesn't protect you. Being competent doesn't shield you. Being a hero doesn't erase the moment when someone looked at you and decided you couldn't possibly know what you were talking about. Be ready, be brave, her bracelet says. She touches it sometimes and thinks, I was ready. I was brave. And I still had to fight for the chance to help. That's the lesson nobody talks about when they share the viral videos and call her a hero. That's the cost nobody calculates when they debate whether Cassandra Morrison was punished enough. That's the truth Matilda Shaw lives with every single day. She saved a life. And she learned that sometimes, that's not enough to make the world believe in you. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it so Matilda's lesson isn't forgotten. What do you think we can do as a society to ensure every child's knowledge and competence is valued, regardless of their age or race?